for The Undertaker. The creative process behind it. You know, here's something funny. Even Vince McMahon was asked this question by Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Vince gave kind of, you know, it's time to give back to the industry, and when it's time to give back to the industry, you give back to the industry, like Andre the Giant gave to Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. In other words, Vince didn't really answer the question. There's only a very select people that understand what happened that night. The referee's not one of them. The music guy is not one of them. Vince McMahon is one of them. The Undertaker, who collapsed behind, and that's a shoot, collapsed behind the curtain, was taken to the hospital for a shoot. Vince McMahon left WrestleMania before Daniel Bryan was crowned champion because The Undertaker was taken out in an ambulance, and we didn't know how bad of a situation we were facing. Undertaker knows what happened that night. I know what happened that night. Brock Lesnar knows what happened that night. Now, here's the funny question. If so few people know, why would we ever open up the secret of what happened? So let me plant a little doubt in your minds where you sit there and say, is Heyman telling us something we're not supposed to know, or is he just f***ing with our heads? So let me ask you this. How do you know it was a creative process? How do you know that was supposed to happen? How do you know? You may think you know, but do you know you know? What would have happened at WrestleMania 30 if Brock Lesnar said, I'm taking it on him. I'm going to dump him on his head. I'm going to knock him out. Then I'm going to F5 him. I'm going to hook his leg. And I'm going to pin him for real. And nobody's going to be able to fire me. Because once I beat that streak, how could they fire me? Now, ask yourself this question. I always joke around and I say, work or shoot, the finish is the same. Because when it comes to Brock Lesnar, work or shoot, the finish is usually the same. So let's say that was Brock Lesnar's mindset that night. Let's say Brock Lesnar said, I don't want to lose. I'm going to win. And they can't do anything about it because they can't fire me if I just beat the streak because I'm the guy everybody's going to talk about. Do you think he can't do it? Do you think The Undertaker would be able to stop Brock Lesnar from taking that victory? Could anybody in WWE stop Brock Lesnar from taking that victory? And what if, this is not the ant with the balls if, this is a true question. What if that's what happened? What would the reaction be? Wouldn't the reaction be exactly what it was? That The Undertaker needed a year just to get his head back into the game? Because he wasn't that badly injured. He went home the next day. He was hurt. He was hospitalized, but he went home the next day. He didn't need a year off, but he took it. Why? Yeah, this is like the Kennedy assassination. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, but the one that I'm offering has never been offered in public before. So I'll say it for the fourth time of the evening. Brock Lesnar does what Brock Lesnar wants to do. And what if on that night, in front of the whole world, live, on the first WrestleMania offered on the network, what if Brock Lesnar decided, I'm going to do what I want to do? What if he really did conquer the streak? What I love most about working with Brock Lesnar is that if I presented this to you about anybody else on that roster, you'd point at me and go, bullshit. But the fact that I presented to you about Brock Lesnar, I guarantee you at least half of you will go home tonight saying, did he just tell us something that we're not supposed to know? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. but it's certainly worthy of a conspiracy theory, isn't it? I met Phil Brooks, CM Punk, when I was on the tail end of my 5-year contract when I joined WWE. And I had been, this was right after ECW One Night Stand, the first one. And I was asked to go to OVW and write and produce their television for Wednesdays. And one of the talent that I got sent early on was Phil Brooks, CM Punk, who had worked for my protege Gabe Sapolsky in Ring of Honor and had built quite a reputation of A, being a fantastic performer, and B, having ideas of his own. Oh no, oh God forbid, somebody has an idea of his own, about his own character, to make himself break through the glass ceiling that so obviously existed. So they brought CM Punk in because he had all this buzz on the internet, and they really didn't know what to do with him. And that's what they said to him. They go, hey, how do you want to, he had a match, a dark match, that wasn't on television. And a certain person went up to him and said, what's your finish? Well, his finish was a pedigree off the top rope called the Pepsi Plunge. Not the best political thing to present to WWE at the time. So he said, I don't know, what finish do you want me to use? And they said, do one of those flippy-dippy things like Jeff Hardy. And he said, well, I don't do flippy-dippy things like Jeff Hardy. And they looked at him, and honestly, they said, you don't? No! Have you ever watched any of my matches? No, we just read about you on the internet. And that's why they hired him. So they had him. It sounds so retarded, doesn't it? But it's true. And that's the thing. I say these things and people go, no way, that really happened. It really happened. So they sent him to OVW and they said, fire this kid. And I'm like, what do you mean fire this kid? I don't fire talent. I don't even hire talent. I develop talent. You send me talent, I develop them, I send them back to the main roster. And they're like, no, just get rid of them. I don't want to get rid of him. This guy's a main event. This guy's a superstar. This guy belongs on top and will succeed on top and will make you money on top. And they just looked at me like I was nuts. So I worked with him, and I directed him, and I protected him. And I kept him in the OVW long past the length that they wanted him to be there. And when we started the new ECW, he was the first guy that I brought with me from OVW because this was the guy I was going to build the promotion around as our new star. So, and then of course, on the December to Dismember, a lot of that had to do with Vince McMahon and I disagreeing as to the presentation and the push of CM Punk. So when Punk went on television in 2011, and I was forgotten by that time. I was out of this business. I was doing a lot of the digital work with Brock Lesnar, who was in UFC. Brock and I had written Brock's autobiography together. I was gone. I was part of history, and part of a history that was quickly being written out and forgotten. And Punk came on television in Las Vegas, of all places, home of UFC, and said, that's right, I'm a Paul Heyman guy. And because he was so hot at the time, people started Googling, well, who's this guy, Paul Heyman? Those who knew me were shocked to hear my name, and those who had no clue who I was became interested in who I was. So a year later, I'm back on television with Brock Lesnar. And the deal that I agreed to when coming back was I work with Brock. I only work with Brock. I have no interest in working with anybody else, nor did they have any interest in me working with anybody else, mind you. That we worked to SummerSlam, which was Brock versus Triple H. We take time off. We come back in February. We build to WrestleMania at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, right over the bridge from New York. It's an easy trip for me. I could even bring my children to the show. And at that point, Brock and I say, it was nice working with you. Thank you. Goodbye. That was the deal. History changed it But that was the premise. We got to SummerSlam. We did SummerSlam. Tapped out Triple H. Broke his arm. Said goodbye the next night in Los Angeles on television. And we were, and that's it. Brock and I were off until February. Vince had the idea the next Monday in Chicago. Key point of this whole story. In Chicago, of the season premiere of Monday Night Raw, which will feature something in which CM Punk now fully goes heel. How do you turn CM Punk heel in Chicago? Make it even more difficult? I'm going to turn him heel on John Cena. Because Night of Champions is in Boston, which is John Cena's hometown, where they are sure to boo John Cena and CM Punk. So Vince comes up with the idea, if I can't make them boo him, I can at least make them gasp. We're gonna go for gasping. Oh, oxygen deprivation is one way. I don't know. How are you gonna make them gasp? So I get a phone call, and it's from Vince, and we didn't have much interaction going into SummerSlam. You know, we were still kind of sore from that thing that I don't want to talk about on the plane. And, you know, hey, pal, I want to talk to you about how do you envision, well, what are you going to be doing? You know, well, you're off until February. I don't know if it's it might be March sometimes. What are you doing next Monday? Watching the show from Chicago on television. And he says, well, that's interesting. I'd like you to have an up-close seat. I got this idea about you working with somebody else, not just Brock Lesnar on my show. And I'm like, you know, Vince, I don't think we ought to go there. I'm real good with Brock, real happy with our deal. I want to, you know, do that thing going into wrestling. I'm going to bring my kids to WrestleMania. Oh, goddamn. I'd like to see your kids at WrestleMania, you know? Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to see your kids at WrestleMania, too. But I don't want to work with anybody else. Well, I was kind of thinking of putting you with. Vince, I don't care. You want to put me with? No, I think you should. Don't put me with anybody. I'm happy with Brock Lesnar. I mean, why? Why would you even think about it? We don't even get along with each other. Why? Who are you going to put me with? CM Punk. Well, I'll see you Monday. Now, you have to understand the uproar that Punk and I had caused behind the scenes that led to that incident on the plane that I don't want to talk about, where I took 5.5 years gone, exiled, written out of history from the company. You have to understand the fact that Punk and I, in those 5.5 years, we talked all the time. I mean, just because I wasn't there doesn't mean I stopped being his rabbi and his friend. So, and a lot of the that he was doing was because we bounced ideas off each other, because I had such respect for him as a talent and as a human being, and so I'll never forget this. We were in the car, that very same Chrysler 300 that when it drove by. Oh my God, it's Heyman! I'm looking at the channel. It's Heyman and Punk, Heyman and Punk. And I looked out and I looked at John Cena, and we drive off. That's the cliffhanger. Who was driving the car with CM Punk all night long, and it ends up being me. Holy Punk and Heyman are together, and I will never forget. We're in commercial. No, not a commercial break. The camera's on the ring, and Cena's laid out, and Punk runs to the back and hops in the car, and the camera cuts back to the ring. And we know we have around 20 seconds before we get the signal, cameras back on us, start driving the car. Because when we drive the car, I have to look out and reveal it just hit the fan. And we're sitting there, and we're both ducked down just in case, the cameras accidentally cut and we don't want to reveal that we're in the car together? Because these are the type of things that lunatics and obsessive people like Punk and I would always think about. Like, what if that camera goes on early and it blows the whole angle? Hey, why don't we just duck down and then the camera goes on early? Nobody will see. And so we duck down by the dashboard and I look over at him and he says, can you believe they're putting us together? And I'm like, we're both gonna be fired in the next 4 weeks, don't you get it? And he goes, but we're gonna stir in 4 weeks. They don't have a clue. I loved working with him. I loved it. I had the time of my life because it was so different from what I was I got to play 2 different characters on television. I got to play the advocate for Brock Lesnar, in which I get to say every single word because there's no reason for Brock to talk because I do. No, I'm not insulting. If you guys saw the promos he did going into UFC 200, you know Brock can talk for himself. But there's no reason for him to talk. The dynamic between us just works better with me doing all the hype about Brock Lesnar, and the thing with Punk is I really didn't have to say much. I told Jericho this. Do you guys remember the movie Purple Rain with Prince? Anybody here that old or ever watch Prince? Guy died in minutes. Purple Rain. No, nobody knows Prince. You don't know Prince? Okay, stupid analogy. Know the age of your audience, Paul. Okay. Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. No, okay. Hey, Bert and Ernie. Rick in the front row. He should have stuck with Prince. Anyway, I just found myself to be the guy that stood behind Punk and made faces. That's all I really did. Punk would be laying into people. I'm CM Punk. I'm the longest reigning WWE champion in the past 25 years. I will rip your stupid head off. I hate Dwayne Johnson. I hate John Cena. I hate Dolph Ziggler. I hate Roberto Del Rio. I hate Vince McMahon. I hate everybody, and I hate each and every one of you. And I'd sit there and go like, and that title weighed like 40 pounds. And I'd sit there, and every time he'd say that he's the champion, and I'd just be begging him to go into something else. I could just bring the title back down. Holy shit, man, that's a workout just holding that thing up. We had a blast working with each other because just like me, he had no idea what he was going to say when he went out to the ring. He was just doing it, allegedly shoot promos that then get wrapped around into the storyline that we're telling, that he fervently believed in his heart that he was telling the truth. Oh, I'm sure Dean Ambrose is very frustrated with it. Is he frustrated with his own performance on the Stone Cold podcast? Ooh, what? Oh, what? I didn't insult them. I'm speaking the truth. You ask a question, you get an answer from me. Sorry that I'm being blunt. What the Come on. Did you see his performance on the Stone Cold podcast? Did it piss off Steve Austin? Did it piss you off too? And you think actually he didn't come into the match with Brock Lesnar with the same attitude? Ask Braun Strowman what happens when you take liberties with Brock Lesnar. Ask Randy Orton what happens when you take liberties with Brock Lesnar. Ask The Undertaker what happens when you take liberties with Brock Lesnar. If that's what happened, because I'm not telling you that's what it was, I'm just throwing out a conspiracy theory for you to think about. You mess with Brock Lesnar, the match is not going to be that good. You're just going to get your ass kicked. You're going to get stretched. You're going to get thrown around, dumped on your head, and Brock Lesnar's going to go out and eat dinner and call you when it's all over. That's it. Happened to Randy Orton, happened to Dean Ambrose, happened to The Undertaker. If that's what happened with The Undertaker, I'm not saying that it did. I'm not saying that it didn't. Happens to anybody that wants to cross Brock Lesnar. Ask Steve Austin how he feels about Dean Ambrose. I'm sure God damn, that kid who came on my podcast, I don't even know what the hell I have from a question. He's sitting there like he's half asleep on me. If Steve Austin could have come out of retirement at that moment, he would have bitch slapped Dean Ambrose all over the stage. It's the truth. Hey, but then again, that's Dean Ambrose's persona. And that goes back to what this gentleman was asking before.
That's who Vince McMahon wants Dean Ambrose to be, so that's who Dean Ambrose is. If Dean Ambrose had done something so egregious that Vince McMahon didn't like it, Dean Ambrose wouldn't be working here anymore. So obviously he's doing something that Vince McMahon likes. Whether we like it, you like it, or anybody else likes it or not, that's a matter of conjecture. Anybody who thinks that Brock Lesnar is lazy is not taking a look at the right circumstance. Come on. Lazy? Lazy got him to an NCAA Division I heavyweight championship. Lazy had him knock out Randy Couture in his fourth MMA fight, the greatest heavyweight champion of all time in UFC. Brock Lesnar didn't grapple Randy Couture, take him down, tap him out. He knocked out Randy Couture in his fourth professional fight. He works his way back to WWE after almost dying from diverticulitis. He comes into this locker room. He's 265 pounds. Then he goes back to 295 pounds, decides to fight a top 8 heavyweight after 6 years out of the octagon named Mark Hunt. I have to say that name separately. Mark Hunt. Because if you say it fast, that's what happens to those Samoans, brother. Goes down to 265, beats Mark Hunt, and then comes back at 295 6 weeks later in WWE and puts on a performance against Randy Orton that pissed off everybody to the point that people in the locker room thought it was for real. And maybe it was. Because I'm not telling you when it comes to Brock Lesnar. I'm just throwing it out there for you to decide for yourselves. Because I knew I had an opportunity to do something that no one else could do. You know, here's the humble part of this business. The humble part of this business. Did Punk know? No. I'll tell you how that happened. Yeah. Vince McMahon did not know about the fact that there was a move to quote unquote hijack Monday Night Raw. And the entire show was laid out, just including a Brock Lesnar, Paul Heyman promo. And about 90 minutes before the show went on the air, I went to Vince and I said, are you aware of what we're facing here just weeks before WrestleMania? And I showed him on my phone just a sampling of what we were about to face on that show. That it was the determination of a very passionate crowd in a very passionate city to take over that show and heckle the show for 3 full hours chanting the name CMPunk. Yeah. Now, Punk and I have seen this industry in very similar ways for a long time. The industry moves forward without you. The industry moved forward without Bruno Sammartino. The industry moved forward without Bob Backlund. The industry moved forward without Hulk Hogan. The industry moved forward without Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. The industry, hey, in the past year, John Cena, who, has pulled this wagon, has been the man in WWE for 15 years. John Cena made fewer appearances than he ever has on any given year that he has since 2002. Company moves on. Company was going to move on without Brock Lesnar. Company's going to move on without Paul Heyman. Company's going to move on without Roman Reigns. And guess what? Company's going to move on one day without Vince McMahon. It just is. And if it doesn't move forward, then what have we built? We built something that means nothing because if it revolves around one person being involved, we're screwed. It can't revolve around one person. So Punk was gone. And the audience was going to hijack the show. And I said, hey, our object is to promote Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker. Well, last year, CM Punk lost to The Undertaker. And that was the beginning of the downward spiral of CM Punk and Paul Heyman, because it all fell apart after that. And I'm going to blame it all on the fans because they took Punk away from me. And you know also I blame besides the fan? I blame The Undertaker. And I'm going to teach The Undertaker a lesson. How? Because since he let the fans of kicking Punk away from me, being the that I am, I'm going to take the streak away from him. And how do I take the streak away from him? Brock Lesnar. So how do I set it up? That's right, because I'm not as much as you are for yelling that out, but I am an. So I said, let me fuck with them. I just want to go out there and fuck with them. God damn it, man. What are you going to say? I don't know. But I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to lure them in. I'm going to turn completely babyface. I'm on their side. Oh, my God, I wish CM Punk was. God damn it! You're going to say CM Punk. You wish he was here tonight? Yeah. Because I do. Because I do wish he was here tonight. And you want to know something? This guy, when he's out there, blames The Undertaker for Punk not being here. And I'm going to take that streak away from The Undertaker. And I just said, just give me 15 minutes. Just let me go out to clear you with him in. Let me take it away from them. And believe me, they'll stop trolling. They won't hijack this show because they'll get all their CM Punk chants out, and then they'll pay attention to the WrestleMania matches that we're promoting. I considered it a challenge. I like to be challenged. I like for someone to come up and do better promos than me because it challenges me to do better promos. Now, Brock Lesnar would like to fight someone that can give him a legitimate fight in this world. That's why he wants to go back to UFC. I want to take on someone that can compete with me on this mic. I do. I want to take on an audience that doesn't make it easy for me. I want to see what I can be challenged and how good I can be because my desire has been since the day I got into this business to be the best ever. I don't walk around going, I'm the best ever. But in my heart, I feel that I am, but I want to know that I am. And I want to push myself to a limit to say, you know what? I'm pretty humble. I know my flaws as a human being. I know the mistakes that I made, but not one back there could have done what I did tonight. And so when I went out there and I lured in that crowd and I just spoke to them, it wasn't, ladies and gentlemen, CM Punk is not here tonight. I talked to them. I came out in the first segment of Raw, which used to be high energy, and I just talked to them. And I lured them in. And I spoke softly. The public leaned in to listen. Once I had them, I just stuck it right up their ass. And when I did, I knew I had them. And when they're sitting there going, you, is when I said, Brock Lesnar. And out comes Brock Lesnar, and those people were willing to pay to see The Undertaker kick Brock Lesnar's ass because of what we did. And they stopped thinking about CM Punk, who simply wasn't around for us to make money with anymore. I'm not, if you think I'm knocking Dean Ambrose here, I'm not. Okay? I'm not. Did you like Dean Ambrose versus Brock Lesnar? Would it have been credible for Dean Ambrose to beat Brock Lesnar in 90 seconds? Okay. Was there anybody else that Brock Lesnar stepped into the ring with during this run since 2012 that you would have watched and said after a 90-second match, oh my God, I can't believe I saw, what the huh? Oh my God, that was amazing. And then come back to even bigger box office after that. Anybody? Anybody? No. But Goldberg. Who? You know what? I got to be honest. I respectfully disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. I wouldn't want to see Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar for 90 seconds. I'd want to see Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar for 90 minutes. I wish we had the opportunity to work with Joe a year earlier. It would have been such a different story because everything in the past year has been the build to this year's WrestleMania. If we had a chance to work with Samoa Joe 2 years ago, oh my God, those would have been 25, 30-minute bloodbaths that just would have completely changed the perplexion of a PG product. I love Samoa Joe. I think he is one of the foremost talents in WWE today. I can't wait to see his heat. So, we go back to this. Now, okay, there's Braun Strowman. And, you know, and on shock value, we could do that with Braun Strowman. But where do you go from there? But the story of this Clint Eastwood-like aging gunslinger that comes back for one more fight, that comes back because his wife and his son have never seen him do his thing better than anybody else, that his son has never heard a stadium filled with people chant his own last name that he will carry on to his children and their children after him. That his family had never gotten a chance to just experience that whole Goldberg electricity, that whole Goldberg phenomenon, just that whole Goldberg experience. So now the aging gunslinger comes back at 50 years old. A little bit lighter, little bit worse for wear, nursing a few injuries, still looks like a killer, doesn't he? And he comes in and he goes, Brock Lesnar, I don't know if you're next, but you're last. And he looks in that camera and he gets that Goldberg thing going, and you go, holy shit, he's going to kick Brock Lesnar's ass. And there's not a lot of people that you can watch. Again, I don't knock Dean Ambrose. Can't watch Dean Ambrose and think he's going to kick Brock Lesnar's ass. Can't look at Seth. I love Seth Rollins' work. Don't think I'm knocking Seth Rollins. I pitched a scenario a few years ago where I would get to work with Seth Rollins. Didn't pan out. Love Seth Rollins, but you're going to believe him kicking Brock Lesnar's ass? I think Finn Balor is one of the most magnificent workers on the face of the planet. Could he push Brock Lesnar in a 30-minute match? Yes, but can I kick Brock Lesnar's ass in 90 seconds? Not credibly. I mean, we go down the list. AJ Styles. I love the Brock Lesnar AJ Styles match. Can AJ Styles beat Brock Lesnar in 90 seconds with that shock value? We had a shock value involved. And here comes Goldberg. Here comes Clint Eastwood coming back for one more fight. And you know it's one more fight. You go, he's going to get his ass kicked by Brock Lesnar. But, man, I would really love to see Goldberg come back and this whole, like Terry Funk did, this whole comeback story. One last run, one last moment, one last spear, one last jackhammer, one last ass kicking. And Goldberg sires Brock Lesnar out of his boots. And you go, whoa, this match started fast. And he hits a second spear. And you go, holy, this is going down really fast. Where are they going from here? And Goldberg takes that step back, and you go, holy shit, he's setting up the jack. Lesnar's going to kick out of the jackhammer. No way, Lesnar's getting beat in 86 seconds. Jackhammer, 1, 2, 3. And you sat there and went, Goldberg is the man. And we brought it back at WrestleMania. We made you wait all the way to WrestleMania to see it happen again. That's box office. Credibility matched with authenticity, with characters you can relate to, and believe in, to where you sit there and you say, I believe in this, I want to see it, I'll pay to see it, and when it's over, they deliver, and I loved their WrestleMania match last year. I think they delivered. I know they delivered. So I loved working with Bill Goldberg. I think he is one of the greatest personas in this industry. Boy, I wish we had him in ECW. Oh my God. The whole concept, by the way, remember, we were doing the Goldberg routine with 911 back in 1993 and 1994. So I loved working with Bill. And as a family man, if you're a father in this audience, we can all aspire to be half the father that Bill Goldberg is to his son.
For those of you who will remember the Monday Night Raw that preceded that promo, they did a vignette on Vince's plane with Mick Foley, where Mick Foley tore into Vince and Vince was just eating fruit and not paying attention to what Mick had to say. And Mick laid some pretty heavy on Vince, and Vince just blew it off and ignored him, in terms of, well, this is the way things are, and I don't give a shit what your opinion is. And we were heading to SmackDown, and Michael Hayes, the fabulous Freebird, WWE Hall of Famer, I might add, and author of Bad Street USA, Nibes. Michael Hayes on the plane looked over at me and says, if you really want someone to do a shoot promo on you, Paulie over there rip your yay wide. And, the alliance had just been such a unmitigated disaster for all of us involved. Both, again, I was on the writing team and on camera at the time. So on both ends of my career, it's just like, oh God, I wish this would just end already. And it was ending, and we were heading towards the conclusion, and Vince just looks, Vince is on the plane. And the funny thing was, just like with Mick Foley, he was legitimately just sitting there, eating fruit or something, just goes over and goes, want to rip me in yay wide? And figuratively, not literally. And And, you know, it had been a while since I had done one of those ECW-style shoot promos. And, you know, do you want me to rip you an wide? As this guy over here found out, I'm the guy to do it. You want me to shoot? I'll shoot. Okay. How far can I go? As much as you can to draw me money. Okay. That I can do. That I can do. I can draw you money and rip you an wide. Let's do it. And we got to SmackDown, and I knew I wanted to invoke the name of a bunch of the promoters that he ran out of business, and I knew I wanted to invoke the name of his father because I knew his father. I worked for his father. I was a teenage photographer that used to get paid for my pictures by Vince McMahon's father, and so I felt I had the right to invoke his father's name, which is a no-no unless you're going to say his name with reverence. You know, we had done the angle where I turned Vince's children, and we've done it 100,000 times since, but this was I turned both of them on Vince at the same time. You know, where Stephanie comes out on TV and goes, I just want my father to die! You know. And okay, so you know we're going with the death of the father from at the behest of the daughter, you know, with the endorsement of the son, and I said, okay, you know, let's see how far I can take this. And the only thing that stuck in my head was sports entertainment versus wrestling, sports entertainment versus wrestling. That if I can just get that hook in, people will really go, Heyman is shooting on Vince McMahon. And so I came up with the line, you made wrestling a dirty word, didn't you, Vince? And I went, wow, that's the core. And as long as I can build this promo around that core, I have no idea what I'm going to say out there, but I know that's the message I want to send. That ECW and, you know, WCW, the Alliance represents wrestling, and you scumbag, barrel-chested Irish, you represent sports entertainment. You want superstars. We want wrestlers. You know, and that's the core of it. So, to his credit, I'll give him a ton of credit. I went up to Vince halfway through the day and I said, do you even want to know what I'm, you know, some of the shit I want to say to you? And he went, no, draw me money, you know? Okay, are you going to say anything back to me? No, just draw me money, you know? And, you know, and we came up with the idea of Taz choking me out at the end, you know, because Taz was no longer really in the ring, and he was sitting at the commentator table, and I just looked, you know, and I just looked at him at the time as this big fat butterball sitting with Michael Cole that used to be the toughest guy in, brother, I'll choke you out. I'm Taz, I'm from Brooklyn, you know? And now he's just, you know, and the line was, and now you've reduced him to being just a commentator and not a good one at that. You know? You know, and then I just told Taz, I said, you know the cue, don't you? And he goes, no. I said, oh, you'll know it when I get to you. You know? And I said to him, listen, the cameras are going to be tight on us. You know, bring that choke, man. You know, tighten it up. Bring it in. Oh, God, did he bring it? Oh, he jumped the shit out of me. And God bless him for doing it. So we were in Gorilla, and I was about to go out to cut the promo, and I looked over at Vince, who was eating a protein bar, and I said, hey, you sure you don't want to know anything I'm going to say here? Some of this real heavy. Will it draw me money? Yeah. It'll get a lot of attention, Vince, that I promise you. It's the go-home show, goddammit. Bring it. Yes, sir, Captain. I'm on my way. And so I went out there, and for however many minutes it was, I laid into Vince McMahon in a shoot to, as I recommend anybody that ever wants to do a shoot promo, keep in mind the fact that shooting in and of itself is very Vince Russo. It does not work. No one here wants to just hear me shoot. I can shoot all night long, and you'll sit there and go, this who gives a. But if I can turn that shoot into storyline context and then manipulate what you're listening to, into making you want to buy a ticket, to where I take that shoot and I make you say, you know, he did make wrestling a dirty word. You know what? He did make superstars when I want to see wrestlers. He did do him, man. I'm going to buy that pay-per-view because I want those guys to win. Now that shoot draws money. So we took this realistic premise, which is known as a shoot, and we went as far as we could with the shoot comments, manipulated them into the storyline that we were presenting for that Sunday, and set forth a segment on SmackDown that to this day, as you just learned from Kenny, I still get asked all about, because people still wonder, how was that planned? What did Vince know? How much was scripted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it still intrigues people to this day, which is the design of what they call the shoot promo. Shoot promos are not supposed to be, hey man, I know that your wife cheated on you and that your third kid ain't really your kid. And people at home go, I don't give a shit. I want to see two guys fight. But if you make that promo something that people can feel in their hearts, and it strikes their passion, you know, the Bubba Ray Dudley always says, strike a chord, man. Strike a chord on somebody and you'll sell a ticket. You strike a chord, sell a ticket. And that's what we tried to do. And to Vince's credit, he took a ferocious promo said to his face with some that I don't think a lot of people have ever said to him, and he took it so that he could draw money, and he didn't share a lot of that money with me when the buy rate came in, because in his mind he probably thought, oh, you got your payday by being able to say that to me.
Brock was in the ring early in the day during the show, and there was a bunch of these old-timers that at the time were producers, and they're giving him the worst advice ever. You should be a Russian. You should stand in the middle of the ring and do nothing and just let people bounce off of you. This is an NCAA Division I heavyweight champion whose combine number, you know what combine numbers are in football? Anybody know what that means? When Brock Lesnar went to try out for the Minnesota Vikings in 2004, right before Brock went to Phoenix, Arizona to try out for the Vikings, Brock flipped his motorcycle. He broke his jaw, which was wired, which he then cut off with a pair of pliers. He fractured his pelvis, and he tore his groin, which means from his belly button down to his knee, he was bruised. He was black and purple from his belly button down to his knee. This was within a week of going to camp. He showed up at camp at 295 pounds with a broken jaw, fractured pelvis, and a torn groin. And he ran the 100-yard dash and the quarter mile in Olympic qualifying time. Think about the enormity of the athletic ability we're discussing. And this guy is in the ring as an NCAA Division I heavyweight champion, and people are saying to him, you should be a Russian. You should just stand there. Like he's the warlord or something. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? So here's Taz. And Taz was this huge amateur wrestling fan. And Taz goes up to Brock and says, hey, brother, they're giving you the wrong advice, brother. You don't want to do this. And Brock just says, yeah, I know, but I'm listening to what they tell me, and I got it. I know when to speak up and when not to. And Taz says, I want you to talk to somebody. And Taz brings him to me. And Taz starts telling me what these guys are telling him, and I just look at Brock. I say, you realize if you do what they're telling you, it will ruin you. You'll leave here in 6 months. And he goes, I get it. I said, you want me to talk to Vince about this? And he goes, yeah, I'd really like you to talk to Vince about this. Now, here's part of the story nobody knows. This was right, here comes what's going to be the headlines tomorrow from this show. This was right before WrestleMania in Toronto, 2002, which had that match between Hulk Hogan and The Rock that we all want to have that type of crowd reaction when you're in the ring, right? So I was scheduled to come back because I had left being an on-air position after Survivor Series when the WWF beat the Alliance. Remember the Alliance, WCW and ECW Alliance? And I left as commentary. There, Jerry Lawler came back on the air, and I was off air. I was behind the scenes. And I was scheduled to come back on the air in 2002 at WrestleMania with Chris Benoit. And that was set. And I went to Vince 2 or 3 weeks before WrestleMania, and I said, hey, I'd like you to let me produce Brock Lesnar's matches. Oh, right ahead. Let's see what you can do with them. And I went to Brock, and I said, okay, pick an opponent. And the first 2 opponents that he picked for that week were Funaki and Spike Dudley. See, you think he's just some dumb farm boy from Webster, South Dakota. He knows what he's doing. Give me Funaki and Spike Dudley. And we were off to the races from there. He tossed them around. He beat the living crap out of them. He threw them every which way but Sunday, and probably on Sunday too. And I went back to Vince and I said, what do you think? And he goes, God damn, this guy is money. And we did it the next week, and we did it on the go-home week. So the night before WrestleMania, we're sitting in a production meeting going over the show. And we get to the Benoit match, and Vince mentions nothing about me and Benoit. And I look, who's saying my boy? Why? Yeah, you can admire his work all you want, but you know what? You can admire his work all you want, but I'll give you my take on it. Since you want to keep on yelling out my boy, 3 people died in that house that night. 3, I don't care about CTE. 3 people died in that house that night. Only 1 person had the choice behind it. The other 2 didn't have a choice to die. So if that's your boy, you. As a performer, amongst the 5 greatest I've ever seen in my entire life. As a performer, loved having him in ECW, was going to make him the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, was going to put him in a feud with Eddie Guerrero that would have carried us. The very first pay-per-view was going to be Sabu versus Taz, Tommy Dreamer versus Raven, Chris Benoit versus Eddie Guerrero. If we had gone on pay-per-view in 96, that would have been our first pay-per-view. So as a talent, remarkable. As a human being, I don't care about CTE. I don't care what the reasons are. Nancy and Daniel had no option. He did. So we get to the Benoit match. And Vince doesn't even mention, and I'm going, well, I guess I'm not going to work with Chris Benoit. And I wait till after the meeting because there's no reason to challenge him during the meeting. Obviously, he has something in mind. What am I going to do, pick a fight for no reason? And when the meeting's over, I look at him and I said, hey, this thing with Benoit, it's off. And he looks at me and goes, think I'm going to put you with Brock Lesnar. What do you think about that? Listen, I watched Brock Lesnar win the NCAA Division I Heavyweight Championship. I kept tabs. God, I would have loved to have him in ECW in 2000. I watched him break in. I watched his tapes from OVW. I watched his dark matches. I produced the last 3 weeks of his dark matches. I knew this was the next big thing. There was nothing and nobody like Brock Lesnar. And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to work with Brock Lesnar. Give us a little time now. Get this act together. Oh, God damn it, you start the day after Mania. Okay. You got it. Watch out, though. Yeah, why is that? And I said, and here's the funny thing. And I said to Vince, he's the next big thing. And Vince looks at me and goes, God damn it, Paul, that nickname would suck. Now, I have to tell you, I have butted heads with Vince McMahon for many, many years. And to his credit, he's been right most of the time in our arguments. I'll give him that because I'm his boy. I'm sucking his ass right now. But on that one, I can tell you I was right.
There was an incident on the airplane with me and Vince after the December to Dismember. The December to Dismember was the worst pay-per-view presentation I've ever had nightmares about. It sucked. The show just was a brutal abomination of the concept of wrestling, sports entertainment, pay-per-view, television. The human existence was set back in time by how deplorable of a show this was. We were all together involved in a show that could not have been presented in a worst possible fashion, that if you wanted to sabotage your own business, your own legacy, your own wrestlers, your own cameramen, your own pay-per-view industry, a publicly traded company, and all those involved in it, you couldn't have written it this good to f yourself up. And the one that got dismembered in that December is the schmuck sitting in the chair right here. It just sucked. It was such a horrible show. And I was very pissed off about it because most of the things that the public rebelled against this show were things that I were sending memos about, saying, we better not do this because of this. Please don't do this because of this. Let's not do this. Listen, this is just going to backfire. Let's not do this. And I had a concept that I was too passionate, admittedly, too passionate about, in which I either wanted, if Bobby Lashley were to become the champion, I wanted him to, relax, I wanted him to become the champion as a heel, in which we'd get to WrestleMania, and I wrote this out, by the way. I wrote out December to Dismember to WrestleMania. Bobby Lashley would end up in WrestleMania against Rob Van Dam against CM Punk. Three-way match. If they didn't like that pitch, I had a program from December to Dismember to WrestleMania, Bobby Lashley versus Rob Van Dam, and I had Bobby Lashley versus CM Punk. I had CM Punk versus Rob Van Dam with the winner facing Bobby Lashley. I had all these different scenarios. Okay, I also offered a way for Rob Van Dam to win the title, and he'd go to WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley, or he'd go to WrestleMania against CM Punk, or he'd go to WrestleMania against Bobby Lashley and CM Punk. And then I had the bright idea of pitching to Vince, why don't we have Punk, who's the new star that everybody seems to be rallying around, why don't we have Punk choke out the Big Show in the first 4 minutes of the match, so that now you know we're going to have a new World Heavyweight Champion in this match, and why don't we put the title on Punk, since everybody seems to be falling in love with this kid. And every one of the scenarios that I pitched, who was the first guy eliminated in that match? Punk. Who was the second? Van Dam. And it seemed awful spiteful to me. And Vince and I were butting heads, and I wanted out anyway. I couldn't stand what was being done to the version of ECW. I felt like I had whored out my own legacy. I didn't want to represent their version of ECW anymore. I just wanted to go home. And to be fair, Vince wanted me to go home too. And he sure made sure that I did. So what happened on that plane was, to avoid your question with all due respect, what happened on that plane was the culmination of me knowing Vince and Vince knowing me since I was 15 years old. He's never went public with what happened on that plane. And because it was between me and him, and by the way, there was no sex involved or anything like that. There's nothing salacious involved. Because, I mean, and no, I didn't kick his ass because I can't, and no, he didn't kick my ass because he didn't. But it was a very heated personal argument between the two of us once the plane landed and everybody else got off the plane, and it was time for me to go home. Now, as I told Steve Austin, there were two people in the company. You know, the old cowboy western Clint Eastwood, John Wayne thing. This town ain't big enough for the two of us. One is, you know, the New York Jew boy sitting in front of you, former owner of ECW, and the other was the majority owner, majority shareholder, chairman of the board, CEO, COO, head writer, and ultimate boss and god of his own universe. Who owned at the time, I believe, 97.8% of the voting shares of the company. Now, I don't know how your math goes, and mine wasn't A+ in college, but it wasn't that far. But in my mathematical equation, if one of us is going to be shown the door, ain't gonna be him. So that was it. I was gone. I couldn't take it anymore. And I went home, and they were more than happy to send me home, by the way, especially after the things that I said to him on the plane. But I don't want to ever violate a confidence that I think remained between me and Vince, because we're the only two people on this planet who truly know what was said on that plane. And because of that, until he wants to go public with it, I don't want to. I think that's between me and Vince.